Your metabolism part would be initiated when the chemistry part of the carbohydrate, protein and lipids would be over. So at this stage, we are just discussing about the chemistry of different macromolecules. So today, another macromolecule that we are supposed to discuss is about proteins. Now, before beginning with the protein part, like we started with the building block of a carbohydrate, that was monosaccharide, in the same way, for the protein part, we are going to begin with something that makes up a protein. Which makes up a protein is an amino acid. So we are starting with what basically the protein is and what are the different amino acids that make up of a protein, how the proteins are formed, what different amino acids they basically contribute in the formation of proteins. So the protein part, the chemistry of the protein part, here we have divided into two lectures. Today we'll basically focus on the amino acids, and tomorrow we are going to focus on how these amino acids they are going to form a protein. So today's lecture is for the amino acids. And this is your competency, a part of your competency, that is BI 5.1. Partially it would be covered here because it also has metabolism. Metabolism part of protein would be taken up by Professor Khurshid Alam. So for today's lecture, we have specific objectives. And with these objectives, we are going to begin that what are basically amino acids, how they become the component of a protein, how these proteins they are built up by the amino acids through a peptide bond. And before entering into the macromolecule, which we call it as a protein, there is a transit state which is known as a peptide. And in our body, we have peptides which are not proteins, but still they are active and functional. Now, what is the biomedical importance of an amino acid? See, what comes in our mind is that amino acids are there to form a protein. Amino acids, they link together through a peptide bond, and what ultimately results is a protein. And what protein does? Number of functions: contractile function, transport function, they act as enzymes, they act as hormones, they are variable functions of proteins. But another function of an amino acid is that they contribute in the synthesis of purines and pyrimidines. So the nitrogen and carbons of these purines and pyrimidines, they are coming from different amino acids when they are block by block build up. Block by block building up is known as a de novo pathway. And when we simply join like different nitrogenous bases and ribose and phosphate, that is known as salvaging. So salvaging does not involve the amino acid contribution, but block by block building contributing carbon, nitrogen of purines and pyrimidines, which is known as a de novo pathway. De novo का मतलब होता है नया शुरू करना, de novo, नया. So this new starting from the block is contributed by amino acids. So both purines and pyrimidines, their synthesis involves the presence of different amino acids. Then amino acids are also involved in the synthesis of different neurotransmitters like GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid. Then we have epinephrine, norepinephrine, serotonin. They are coming directly from the amino acids. So they are metabolized, they are decarboxylated, and then they are converted to neurotransmitters. So now you understand how important is the presence of an amino acid pool in your blood. Because if this is going to be compromised, the compromise would be at the level of your DNA, RNA, because purines and pyrimidines would be lacking. And compromise would also be at the level of your neurotransmission as well. Then another function, synthesis of all the hormones which are proteinaceous in nature and not steroidal. Here the synthesis of hormones means those hormones which are made up of proteins not those hormones which are steroids derived. Then it acts, amino acids, they join together to form some antioxidants like glutathione. Glutathione is an antioxidant which is very significant for protecting your membrane of RBCs specifically, because RBCs are those type of cells which lack different organelles, which lack nucleus. So in itself, it cannot synthesize many things. So glutathione is one of the antioxidant that is helping the RBC to maintain its cellular integrity by maintaining its membrane. And that is coming from 3 amino acids, and the name of glutathione is gamma glutamyl cystenyl glycine. So it's glutamyl, glutamic acid, cystenyl, cysteine, glycine is glycine, another amino acid. So it's made up of 3 amino acids. So it's not a protein, it's a very small structure. So here amino acids are contributing in the synthesis of an antioxidant as well. Then different amino acids, they are given as parenteral nutrition. That is, they are infused in a disease, in a person who is suffering from particular disease, cannot take up nutrition orally or after surgery or after different other traumas or compromise. And mostly this type of nutrition is given after chemotherapy as well. So these are contributing for the nutrition purpose also. Then different antibiotics and different analgesics are derived from amino acids. Different endorphins, they act as analgesics. They are coming from amino acids. So we have, apart from the protein synthesis, these number of functions which are coming from amino acids. And that is why it is very important for you to understand how these proteins are built up. Why is it significant to study about amino acids? What is the different specific group that are contributing to these functions, and that becomes the reason that it is included in your syllabus. Now, if we look at the general structure of an amino acid, it has one carbon, that is an alpha carbon, and to which are 4 different groups that are attached. One of the group is a carboxylic group that will be there every time. So this red part would be there every time. Then we have an amino group, the blue part. This is contributing to the N terminus end. This is carboxylic group is contributing to the C terminus end. And the third group that is attached to the carbon, because it is one carbon, so we are calling it as an alpha carbon. It is directly attached to the functional group. So the fourth group is an hydrogen atom. So up to this part, every amino acid will look the same. The amino group, the carboxylic group, and the hydrogen. Now we have a side chain R that is variable. And by varying this side chain, we form, rather the nature forms different amino acids. So our body is capable of differentiating these amino acids because of the presence of this R group, which is variable in all the amino acids. Rest, this whole backbone structure is constant. It will remain the same. Now, how many different types of amino acids are there in our system? Anybody? How many different amino acids are there? Anybody can tell me?
20.
20. And in literature now we have 2 more amino acids that are included. So in human system, we have 20 amino acids. But if it include the bacterial and the viral system, we have 22 amino acids. So there are 2 amino acids, cellulose-cysteine and pyrrole lysine, that are also included. 21 selenocysteine and 22nd pyrrole lysine, but they are not there in the human system. Rather, also we don't have any code for these 21 and 22 amino acids. So at this point of time, it's 20. And these 20 amino acids, we are having the code for them. We have a genetic code for them. And what they are doing? They are making the structure of a protein. All the 20 amino acids which we know, they are known as standard amino acids. And we call them as standard amino acids. The only reason is that One have the genetic code, another they make the structure of a protein. So these 20 are standard. Other than these 20, we have more than 300 amino acids that are known, but they are not standard amino acids. They are the amino acids which are produced during the course of metabolism. We don't have the genetic code for them, and they are never going to form the structure of a protein. But still, because they satisfy the 4 different groups attached, the carboxylic acid and the amino acid with a hydrogen atom and a side chain, we call them as amino acids. So they are definitely amino acids, but they are non-standard amino acids. Like we have citrulline that is formed, we have homocysteine that is formed. So some of the metabolic sequences, they generate these amino acids in between. They are metabolized, they are converted to some other compound, but never they are going to become a part of your protein. Now in human system, all the carbohydrates that are there in our body, they are D carbohydrates, capital D. And all the amino acids that are there in the human system are capital L. Capital L orientation around the functional group towards the left hand side. But in microbes and in viruses, both type of amino acids are there. That is, they could be D type or L type. But human system, L amino acid, D carbohydrate. Okay. Now most of the amino acids, they are alpha amino acids. They have an alpha amino group. The exceptions in our system are gamma amino butyric acid. It's gamma amino butyric acids. This is another an amino acid. This is a component which is a non-standard amino acid. Then we have beta alanine. Alanine is one thing that is a standard amino acid. This is an alpha amino acid, but this component beta alanine is an amino acid that is not alpha amino acid. So these are the 2 exceptions which are not an alpha amino acid, but still they are amino acids, but they are non-standard one. So both GABA and beta alanine, non-alpha amino acids, and they are non-standard amino acids. So now we know that there are 20 amino acids. Want to say something?
Ma'am, can you please tell what is the difference between alpha and beta amino acids?
See, if you look here, the amino group is attached to the alpha carbon atom. This is the general structure of an amino acid, which is known as an alpha amino acid because the amino group is attached to the alpha carbon atom. Okay. Now the structure is not shown here, but the GABA one has the amino group at the gamma carbon atom. So it is GABA gamma amino butyric acid. So the amino group will not be attached directly to the alpha carbon atom, but rather it would be attached to the gamma position. In case of beta alanine is one of the metabolite that is produced during the degradation of pyrimidines. So beta alanine has a beta amino group. It's not attached to the alpha carbon atom. So they are not alpha amino acid. अगर alpha carbon पे होगा तो amino group तो वो alpha amino होगा. ठीक? हाँ या नहीं?
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. If the board would have been there, then I could have drawn it. That would be made more clear. Acha. Ab we say that amino acids are 20 in nature. One thing is we write down their name. Another thing is that we abbreviate them. So abbreviation is done in 2 ways. Either you write it there in the form of a 3-letter abbreviation. That is for glycine, it's GLY, G-L-Y. Or it is indicated by just 1 letter, 1 alphabet, that is G, capital G. But it does not, like it's glycine, so only the first 3 would not be taken. It's not always that way. Say for example, for alanine, ALA, capital A. But for glutamic acids, it's GLU, G-L-U, but the 1-letter abbreviation is E. So you don't need to remember these things, but you need to understand that this is one of the way for writing the abbreviation of an amino acid, so that if it is given to you in a written form, you can just identify that we are talking about a peptide or we are talking about a amino acid. Nobody needs to summarize or memorize all these things, because just few amino acids, if you remember, like ALA and A, glycine, G, that is going to serve the purpose. Then for glutamine, it's not glue, it's GLN, and it is represented by Q. So we have two ways of representation, a 3-letter representation and a 1-letter representation. When you're going to go through your books, you're going to see the formation of a peptide. This thing will make you understand that we can represent an amino acid in both the ways, a 3-letter and a 1-letter way. Now there are 20 amino acids. One thing is to go around all the structures of 20 amino acids. And another way is to discuss about those amino acids where you are going to study the metabolism and which are responsible for the synthesis of certain very important components. At this point, remember, no one is going to ask you to draw the structure of an amino acid. No. What is expected is that you know what are the different type of R groups that are there, what is the sequence of where it contributes in the metabolism, that will be dealt later on, and what are the special amino acids with special R groups that contribute in the formation with special R groups has to be remembered by you. Like for example, arginine. Arginine has a group where R group would be a guanidinium group. अभी जो पूरा guanidinium group है, अगर कोई याद रख रहा है, it's very good. But even if you are not able to remember, you are supposed to remember that arginine has a guanidinium group. That at least that part is expected. Now, what is arginine doing? Arginine in our body is synthesizing creatine. And creatine is a very important muscle component. It's a muscle peptide that helps our body to maintain the ATP pool. See, ATP pool in our system is very limited. For a sprint runner, say for example, or if a person hears that there's a bomb kept inside the room, you need an instant release of energy to run outside. That ATP is not going to serve you the purpose until and unless you have a continuous supply of ATP. That supply of ATP is done by this component creatine in the form of creatine phosphate. It's activated by attaching a phosphate. So it's a small muscle peptide, very important to your system for maintaining your ATP pool. And from where is it coming? It is synthesized because of the presence of arginine. Arginine is one of the amino acid that helps in the synthesis of creatine. And if arginine is not supplied to the system, if you are lacking with arginine, there would be the compromise at the level of this muscle component. Then it is involved in the synthesis of nitric oxide. अब ये nitric oxide तो बड़ी अजीब सी चीज आ गई, लग रहा है chemistry आ गई, लेकिन nitric oxide के बहुत important roles होते हैं. It is an antioxidant quencher जो आजकल हमें pollution से बचा रही होगी. और उसके अलावा it acts as a blood regulator, it acts as a vasodilator, it's a signaling protein, it's a cellular machinery regulating, sorry, not small amino component, it's not a protein, nitric oxide is not a protein, it's a very small gas which a very short half-life. This is also given as an anesthetic. This is also given for the treatment purposes. So this nitric oxide is also synthesized because of the presence of arginine. Then arginine is also involved in the release of insulin. And this is the reason that when we take glucose orally through our mouth, it is metabolized faster because we have different other food components along with it. So carbohydrate intake along with arginine helps in the insulin release. So if your diet is complete, it is having arginine, it is rich in protein, then the metabolism of sugar would be better rather than giving glucose intravenously, because we have different other incretins. Insulin releasing substances are known as incretin, and arginine is acting as an incretin, or it is helping or aiding in the insulin release. So these are the functions of arginine. Arginine with a guanidinium group. So this is one amino acid with a very special R group. Then another amino acid, that is phenylalanine. Phenylalanine is having benzene, and this is responsible for the synthesis of another amino acid that is known as tyrosine. So if your system is adequately supplied of phenylalanine, there will not be any deficiency of tyrosine. So tyrosine is synthesized by your system. Phenylalanine has to be provided from outside. Then we have tyrosine coming from phenylalanine. These two amino acids you would be repetitively taught of, phenylalanine and tyrosine. Tyrosine is having a phenol group. This is responsible for the synthesis of epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, melanin, T3 and T4. These are thyroid hormones, both T3 and T4. So tyrosine, now see the importance of tyrosine. Just one amino acid would be converted to so many components through its metabolism. Now, for a person who is suffering from phenylketonuria, or for a person whose diet is deficient from phenylalanine continuously, not a moment for a moment or for 2-3 days or for a month, if you are deficient in phenylalanine, it's not going to be responsible for the precipitation of a disease. Rather, if a system is genetically lacking certain enzymes, or if a system is continuously being deprived of phenylalanine, what will happen? Tyrosine won't be synthesized. And when tyrosine will not be produced, your system will not have epinephrine. So neurotransmitters will not be appropriately there. You will not have dopamine. Skin pigmentation would be affected because melanin synthesis is now compromised. And the thyroid hormone synthesis would also be affected. So gross significant difference would be faced by your system just because of the absence of one amino acid, tyrosine. Now see, this is just a representation. The whole process would be made or studied by you in detail. But how this dietary phenylalanine is contributing is that phenylalanine is coming from the diet. So it is not synthesized by our system. It's essential in nature that you take it from the diet. It's essential to take it from the diet. Now this phenylalanine would be contributing in the formation of tyrosine. So tyrosine would become essential if phenylalanine is not adequately supplied. Otherwise, tyrosine is not essential because your system is converting phenylalanines to tyrosine until and unless phenylalanine is adequately supplied in your diet. Now, what it is contributing, what tyrosine is doing, this tyrosine is stimulating, or rather this tyrosine is going to the thyroid gland, converted to T3, T4, triiodothyronine and tetraiodothyronine. Then it is converting in your adrenal medullary system into neurotransmitters and hormones. Then it is contributing towards the synthesis of your skin pigment. And finally, it is metabolized in your liver. So remember specifically about phenylalanine and tyrosine. Phenylalanine forms tyrosine. Then we have tryptophan. Anybody can tell me what is the best source of tryptophan? Anyone? No answers? See, milk is one of the pure milk, definitely is one of the best source for tryptophan. पुराने जमाने में बच्चों को एक आदत डलवाई जाती थी कि रात के खाने के बाद warm glass of milk has to be consumed. Is there anybody who still takes warm glass of milk before going to sleep?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very nice. See, tryptophan is having a very specific group that is represented by a black ring, like two rings attached together with a CH2 group. This ring is known as an indole ring. So tryptophan has a specific R group indole ring. Tryptophan is converted into 5-hydroxytryptamine, and this 5-hydroxytryptamine is known as serotonin. Serotonin is an hormone that gives satiety to your system. Satiety matlab? किसे कहते हैं?
Satisfaction.
Satisfaction. सुकून, तसल्ली. So this sukoon and tasalli and satisfaction is lacking nowadays. We are never satisfied. So tryptophan is producing a small amino acid metabolized, converted into 5-hydroxytryptamine, known as serotonin, does many functions. One of the function is to provide satiety. And this tryptophan, if it is not there, another important thing that will not be that would be compromised would be that it is involved in the synthesis of niacin. Niacin is a vitamin. So tryptophan has two purposes to serve in your system. It has an indole ring. It helps in the synthesis of niacin, and it is also directly involved in the synthesis of serotonin. So this is again an amino acid with a special R group. The metabolism you will study in detail. Then we have histidine. Histidine has a group that is known as imidazole group or imidazole ring. One of the most important function of histidine is that this is the only amino acid which has its pI value. We'll see what is the, say, it has its ionizable pH values near to our pH values. So when the pH values that are at which it is ionized are same as the pH or our physiological pH values, then at this point we can say, because of the similarities, that this is the amino acid which acts as a buffer in our system. Hemoglobin is one of the protein that serves the purpose of buffering. अभी आपने जब 11th में या 12th में पढ़ा होगा तो आपने हीमोग्लोबिन कर्व शिफ्ट्स पढ़े होंगे, तो उसमें वो बफरिंग भी शो करता है. तो जो शिफ्टिंग होती है हीमोग्लोबिन की, कि वो रेस्पिरेटरी शिफ्ट कैसे आता है, एसिडिक होगा तो क्या होगा, हाइपरवेंटिलेशन होगा तो क्या होगा, दैट इज बिकॉज स्पेसिफिकली बिकॉज ऑफ द प्रेजेंस ऑफ दिस अमीनो एसिड दैट इज हिस्टिडीन. So this is contributing to the buffering of number of proteins. It is there in the albumin. So all those proteins which have histidine, which are histidine rich, they have the capability of acting as a buffer. Then it is also involved in the synthesis of histamine. Histamine is responsible for the number of inflammatory reactions. So here we remember three things. One, the ring part, and two functions. Histidine, imidazole ring. Function, synthesis of histamine. And secondly, it acts as a buffer. So all the proteins rich in histidine would have the capability of acting as buffer in our body. Now, how do we classify amino acids? See, we have three ways of amino acid classification. तीन तरह से हम classify करेंगे. One is that on the basis of the R group, that is based on the side chain. Rest the backbone was constant, so it's not undergoing any change. So one of the classification is what is the type of R group that is there. So first classification is based on the side chain. Second classification is how they are metabolized by your system. What are the components that are being ultimately released when the amino acids, they are broken down or they are metabolized by the human body. And the third thing is that they are based on how much you require them. What is the requirement by your system? Is it essential to take from outside, from the diet, or even if you are not taking it from the diet, your system is adequately present with those enzymes which can synthesize these amino acids. So if you are able to synthesize these amino acids, it's not essential to take from the diet, so they become non-essential. If your system is not capable of synthesizing these amino acids, so it becomes essential to take from the diet, so it's an essential amino acid. So we'll see these classifications. So first of all, depending on the side chain. Now, depending on the side chain, we have three possibilities. One thing is that the R group may be non-polar in nature. That is, it is not attracting water. It is not capable of forming hydrogen bonds. So they are non-polar. For example, alanine, valine, and leucine. So at this point, you can remember any 2 or 3 example of amino acids of all the 3 categories. जो भी आपको पसंद हो. सारे नॉन पोलर कोई कभी नहीं पूछेगा. बहुत होता है तो 2 पूछ लेते हैं, अप टू योर चॉइस, कि आपको कोई सा भी नॉन पोलर सिलेक्ट करके आप याद कर लीजिए. Then we have polar, but they are not charged. Polar means that they may be having an OH group, or they may be having certain group that is capable of forming hydrogen bonds with different oxygens or nitrogens or directly with water. So they are polar, but still they don't have any charge. Like serine having an OH group, threonine again with the OH group, cysteine जो mostly सबको याद भी रहता है, उसमें SH group होता है, सल्फा हाइड्रल ग्रुप. लेकिन मिथियोनिन नहीं होगा, क्योंकि मिथियोनिन का जो सल्फर ग्रुप होता है वो इन बिटवीन होता है. सिस्टीन का लास्ट ग्रुप होता है, SH group is at the terminus, but methionine has the sulfur group in between. So methionine is non-polar. Cysteine is a polar but uncharged, no charge is there. Then we have polar. Now when we talk of polar and charged, so at this stage we could have two choices. It could be a positively charged amino acid and it could be a negatively charged amino acid. In our system, we have 3 positively charged amino acids: lysine, arginine, and again here comes histidine, the one that was acting as a buffer. Lysine and arginine both are incretins, insulin release में help करते हैं. लाइसिन आर्जिनिन हिस्टोन्स के भी कंपोनेंट्स होते हैं, क्योंकि डीएनए नेगेटिव होता है तो बाइंडिंग के लिए पॉजिटिव कुछ चाहिए. सो लाइसिन, आर्जिनिन एंड हिस्टिडीन, all the 3 they are polar, positively charged. Glutamic acid, aspartic acid, these are the 2 which are negatively charged. Glutamine, asparagine, they are different things. Glutamic acid or glutamate, aspartic acid or aspartate, they are negatively charged but polar, definitely polar amino acids. So this is just to make you look through the 20 different amino acids, see the representation by a 3-letter word and by a single letter. So we have non-polar amino acids, we have polar ones. At this you can see methionine at 1, 2, 3, the second line, the third non-polar part, it has the sulfur group in between. So there is nothing that could contribute towards the polarity. So methionine is a non-polar amino acid. Now charged ones, lysine, arginine, and histidine, they are positively charged. Aspartic acid and glutamic acid, they are negatively charged. And when we talk of polar amino acids, but without a charge, we can say that serine has an OH group, the blue one. The threonine has an OH group, tyrosine has an OH group, asparagine and glutamine, they can also contribute towards the polarity, but they are not charged. So both asparagine and glutamine are polar but uncharged. Aspartic acid and glutamic acid, they are polar as well as negatively charged. अब ये सारे नहीं याद करने, जो भी आपको 2 पसंद हो, that you can remember. Now the classification that is based on the metabolism. Now here we are talking about what happens to the amino acids when they are metabolized or when they are taken up for the process of metabolism, specifically the catabolism, breaking down of these amino acids, what they are basically forming. At this point, based on the classification, we have ketogenic amino acids, glucogenic amino acids, and those amino acids which are both ketogenic as well as glucogenic. So ketogenic amino acids are those amino acids which form the components of ketone bodies, or which forms the component of lipid part like lysine and leucine. When lysine and leucine, they are broken down, they form either acetone or acetoacetate. Acetone or acetoacetate, they are the components which help in the synthesis of different lipids, even cholesterol or different ketone bodies. These acetones and acetoacetate, they will never ever overlap with the carbohydrate metabolism. So when lysine and leucine, ये 2 ही हैं बस ketogenic amino acids, lysine और leucine. तो जब लाइसिन और ल्यूसीन का ब्रेकडाउन होता है, तो ये ऐसा कंपोनेंट बनाते हैं जो कि फाइनली लिपिड मेटाबॉलिज्म की तरफ डाइवर्ट हो जाता है. So they are known as ketogenic amino acids. Purely glucogenic amino acids are the one that are broken down to synthesize any component that could be merged with the carbohydrate metabolism and not with any other type of macromolecule metabolism. Like they may be synthesizing pyruvate, they may synthesize alpha ketoglutarate, they may synthesize succinate. So succinate, alpha ketoglutarate, a part of a TCA cycle, pyruvate, part of your glycolysis. So when these amino acids, they are 14 in number, when these amino acids, they are broken down, they ultimately form a component, they ultimately form a metabolite, which will merge up with the carbohydrate metabolism. So they are known as glucogenic in nature. Now there are certain amino acids which are both behaving both ways, both ketogenic as well as glucogenic. Now phenylalanine, tyrosine, tryptophan. These are the three amino acids which are aromatic in nature. Aromatic in nature means that they are the one which have benzene ring. And because of the presence of benzene ring, they are aromatic in nature. And because of the presence of their aromatic nature, they are capable of absorbing UV light at 280 nanometers. And this significant property of these three amino acids makes a protein detectable under UV region. So just by scanning a protein at 280 nanometers, you can say that your this sample has a protein or not. So phenylalanine, tyrosine, tryptophan, they all the three, they are aromatic in nature and they are both ketogenic and glucogenic. So a part of this amino acid would be contributing to a metabolite that is linking to the carbohydrate metabolism, and a part of the amino acid would be broken down to such a metabolite that will go to the lipid metabolism. So they will bifurcate at the end, and therefore they are both ketogenic and glucogenic in nature. Remember these three: phenylalanine, tyrosine, tryptophan, and then we have isoleucine. These three are aromatic in nature. Now we have classification that is based on the nutritional requirement. That is how our system requires these amino acids. Now when it is essential to take it from outside, they are known as essential amino acids. This indicates that now our system cannot prepare them. We have to take it from outside. So essential amino acids, they are 8 in number, and they are phenylalanine, tryptophan, valine, leucine, isoleucine, methionine, lysine, and threonine. So there are 8. Then we have semi-essential amino acids. Semi-essential amino acids are the one that would be required by your system from outside under certain conditions. Otherwise, your system is capable enough of producing these amino acids. Like post-surgery, a system goes into a negative nitrogen balance. So under those conditions, you have to provide an arginine histidine-rich diet. Pregnancy, another condition. Then also this arginine and histidine, they act as semi-essential because your system requires them more. Any type of trauma, any type of illness where your system is going into negative nitrogen balance, you have to supply them from outside. Otherwise, your system is very well capable of producing arginines and histidines. So arginine histidine diet is nowadays available in different markets and different medicine shops as well, and at the pharmacies, because they also aid in body building, muscle building. तो arginine के बड़े बड़े पैकेट्स आप जाइएगा कहीं रखे हुए भी दिख जाएंगे malls में. Then we have non-essential amino acids. Non-essential amino acids, they are 10 in number, and these non-essential amino acids are the one that your system will prepare. We have all the enzymes, we have all the machinery to synthesize. So even if you're not taking them from outside, it's not going to be any harmful at any level. Your system will synthesize it. So this whole thing is represented as essential 8, semi-essential 2, and then 8 plus 2 is 10 upper side, 10 the lower side. So essential 1, 10, non-essential 10, essential 8 plus 2, and then we have 10. And this is how they are represented and remembered usually. So it's written as Matt will fly. The last one, lie, ly, is L, capital L and small y. This is representing lysine. So Matt will fly. Matt is वो अलादीन की कौन सी वो थी? Matt वो उड़ गई types thing. So Matt will fly. Matt is M, methionine, A arginine, then double T, tryptophan and threonine. V is for valine, I for isoleucine, L for lysine, P for phenylalanine, so H for histidine. So we have two upper side arginine and histidine there, and then LY for lysine. So this way you can remember that these are all the 10 essential amino acids with two maybe acting as semi-essential like arginine and histidine. Otherwise, it's 10 upper side and 10 the lower side. Then we need to discuss one important thing, one important property of an amino acid, that inside our system, because we have a polar system, our blood is aqueous, our plasma is aqueous. So amino acid will every time be present in the form of a charged moiety, but the net charge on the amino acid will always be zero. Leaving the R group we are talking about. So in our system, the amino acid will behave as a Zwetter ion with charged with the broken down or with the polarized carboxylic group and the amino group. Now the characteristic of this pi is that this is the pH value at which even if the R group is being ionized or if it is being separated into charges, again the net charge over the amino acid becomes zero. So this is that pH at which there is no charge over an amino acid. So every amino acid would be having a different pi value depending on the R group. So that particular pH at which there is no net electric charge over the amino acid, that is known as an isoelectric point or pi for that amino acid. Now what will happen is that if you know the pi of an amino acid, that what is the pH at which this amino acid is not going to be charged, still it's ionized. What is the importance of this thing is that this particular pH could be used for the isolation of that amino acid, because now even if you apply the electric current at that particular pH, it's not going to move because the net charge is zero here. So it is not going to migrate under the applied electric field. तो ये कौन सा pH है? ये वो pH है जिसपे कि जब सारे ग्रुप्स आयनाइज हो जाएंगे तब भी नेट चार्ज अमीनो एसिड पे जीरो रहेगा, तो उसे आइसो इलेक्ट्रिक पीएच या आइसो इलेक्ट्रिक पॉइंट या पीआई वैल्यू कहते हैं. उस पर्टिकुलर पीआई वैल्यू पे अमीनो एसिड कभी भी अप्लाइड इलेक्ट्रिक फील्ड में माइग्रेट नहीं कर पाए. This is the meaning of a PI. Now, if you look here, we have different amino acids which are represented. Say, for example, glycine. Glycine is an amino acid which does not have the R group that could be contributing towards the polarization or towards the breaking down into ions. So glycine has just two groups. One is an acidic group and another is a basic group. So pKa1 is representing the carboxylic group. pKa2 is representing the amino group, and pKa3 would be here just hydrogen. So it's not going to ionize. So it's not contributing towards ionization. So in order to calculate the pi value of those amino acids which have non-ionizable group, that is, they are not charged, what we do is that we just take the average of pKa1 and pKa2, A1 for the acidic group, A2 for the amino group. So that average of these two will give you the pi value. So in this case, glycine would have a pi value of 5.97. What this indicates is that if you are having an electrophoresis operated at a pH of 5.97, glycine will not migrate. It will stop. No migration would be there. How much current you are going to apply to it? Similarly, if you look for the phenylalanine, the green part, again phenylalanine has non-ionizable R group. So we will take just the average of pKa1 and pKa2 and we are going to get the pi value. But for those amino acids which are charged in nature, say for example, in case of glutamic acid has two carboxylic groups, one contributed attached to the alpha carbon that every amino acid has like a backbone. So the pKa1 is 2.19 for glutamic acid. pKa2 is for the alpha amino group, that is 9.67, the pink part. And then we also have a pKa3 because it's an acidic amino acid. So we have another carboxylic group there. So what we will do is that for an acidic amino acid, we will take the average of two ionizable carboxylic groups. So pKa1 plus pKa3 divided by 2 will give you the pi. We are not going to take up the alpha amino group pK value. Then we can discuss about a positively charged amino acid, that is histidine. Now, in case of a positively charged amino acid, histidine, what we are going to do is that 1.82 is for the carboxylic group and pKa2, that is 9.17, is an alpha amino group. And then we have pKa3 contributed by another amino group, that is because histidine is a positively charged amino acid. So that's 6 here. So instead of taking the average of these 1.82 and 1.97 for a positively charged amino acid, we are going to take the average of two ionizable amino groups. So the basic pKa3 plus pKa2 divided by 2. So in case of positively and negatively charged amino acid, the average would be the ionizable group that is contributing to the property of this particular amino acid. That will give you the pi value. Now, if you look at these values, see, it's just histidine which has its pi near to our physiological pH. Rest, it's only 5 and 555 number of times. 2-3 amino acids going up to 6, and then we have in the acidic range. So it's only histidine that has its pKa3 value towards 6 and with a pi value 5 or 7.59. And that makes histidine a buffering component of a protein. There is no amino acid which is touching the 7 value as well. So it's 6.3, 6, 6.0, 5.7, 5.65, 5.68. It's only histidine that has gone up to 7.59. And now what is the pH of our system? What is the pH of our system?
7.4.
7.4.
So it is histidine only that will act as a buffer because it has its pi 7.59. Now see an application of pi value. This is the procedure that is known as isoelectric focusing. Now what is done is that a gradient of pH is formed. So it is written decreasing pH values. Sample is applied. Say for example, you apply your serum, which is a source of a protein. Current is also applied. What will happen is that since it's a gradient of pH, the amino acids will start migrating. Every amino acid is going to stop as soon as it attains its pi value. The pH gradient is there, so it will stop as soon as it encounters its pi value. Now say for example, this red arrow is indicating a band for phenylalanine in case of a normal serum that is applied. If your serum is a normal serum. Now, if your serum is coming from a patient of phenylketonuria, then what will happen? This band will be thickened. क्यों? क्योंकि phenylalanine का metabolism सही नहीं हो रहा होगा, वो accumulate हो रहा होगा. So by comparing the normal band for phenylalanine going through isoelectric focusing and the patient's serum, you are going to analyze which particular amino acid is accumulating or which is present at higher concentration. That is, it's not metabolized properly. This is one of the application of isoelectric focusing. So with the help of pi values, you can identify and isolate a protein and judge about its concentration in your serum as well. Now see what happens. We are saying that these amino acids, they join together to form a peptide bond. Now in the same way as carbohydrates, they join together to form a glycosidic bond. we said that whenever a glycosidic bond is formed, a molecule of water is removed. In the same way, here also, when these two amino acids are joined together, we form a peptide bond and a molecule of water is released. So these are simple condensation reactions where water will be every time removed whenever you are going to join two molecules in a biological system. Now this represents a peptide bond. Now this red part is not just the peptide bond. The red part is indicating that it is not rotatable. Peptide bond is NH and C double bond O. So whenever it is said, right, what is a peptide bond? It is C double bond O NH. The whole thing is a peptide bond. So this thing is a peptide bond. Now the amino terminus is the one which is having a free amino group of an alpha carbon atom. Carboxylic end, because now we are going to polymerize number of amino acids. So the end that is having a free carboxylic group will be named as a carboxylic end or a C terminus. Free amino end, N terminus, free carboxylic group, carboxylic end or a C terminus. Now this whole thing C double bond O NH is your peptide bond. Now when it is said that when few peptides are joined together, we can say them that it's a peptide. Then if more than 50 amino acids are joined together, then we say that it's going now towards the formation of a protein because it becomes a high molecular weight. Smallest peptide that could be formed is a dipeptide. And when a term dipeptide is used, it is indicating not two peptide bonds. A dipeptide is a term used for two amino acids that are joined together. This is a term that is slightly confusing. Dipeptide से लगता है कि दो peptide bonds, जबकि dipeptide में एक peptide bond होगा और दो amino acid. Similarly, whenever you say tripeptide, this is indicating that there are three amino acids and two peptide bonds. Now there is a term that whenever an amino acid is being incorporated to form a peptide, it is not called as an amino acid. Rather, we call it as a residue because it is the residual part since a water molecule is removed. So amino acid that has been involved in the formation of a peptide bond are not called as amino acids, rather they are called as residues. So if we are talking about a tripeptide, we can say that there are three residues in it. If we are saying it's a dipeptide, we can say that there are